Today. As Marty said, yes, my name is Nick Marinello. I'm the president of Focal Point Business Coaching here in New Jersey. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I started on Wall Street in '82 as a smile and dial stockbroker. And from that point forward, I started to build businesses. Started my own brokerage firm, my investment brokerage firm in 1996, in investment advisory, and grew that to a pretty substantial size, about 250 advisors around the country. We sold that in 2004, started a business focusing on financial services to the trust banks and the technology behind the scenes. And that did really well. We sold that in 2011 to LPL Financial. So those of you who know the financial services businesses will recognize LPL Financial as the largest independent brokerage firm in the world. Since that time, I'm working with folks such as yourself, small to mid-sized business owners, helping people focus their energies, making sure that they have the right mindset, making sure that they have the right activities lined up for the days to be sure that they achieve their goals. The tagline is build a better business, live a better life, right? So that's why we're here. We're all here to build better businesses, really so that we can live better lives. I've always looked at my businesses as a tool or as a mechanism to get me to a better stage of life, whether it be for my family or myself, my community. So that's my tagline. And I believe that, if we can make incremental changes to our business, we can actually grow them dramatically, and that will translate into a better lifestyle for us. So again, appreciate the opportunity to speak with everybody today. What I'm going to ask you to do, and did that slide change?
Yes.
Okay, great. What I'm going to ask you to do today is really just try to focus your energy as much as you can, I should say. Wring out the most you can from today's session. And I'm sure you've been told this before. To try to turn off your cell phones, try not to check your emails and so forth. I am going to cover a lot of material today. There were emailed out to everybody, or hope so anyway, a number of worksheets that were designed to allow you to take the information I'm going to give you today and then run with it after today's session, because obviously we can just accomplish so much in 1 hour. All right, but we want to have, like any good business coach, okay, I'm going to give you homework. All right, so I want to set the framework today so that you really can take this information and drive to success. So we have some goals, right? First goal is to develop absolute clarity in your business strategy. It is absolutely important, okay, to spend time in establishing clarity. Without clarity, it creates anxiety. No doubt about that. 90% of our anxiety comes from the fact that we don't know what's coming down the pike. And frankly, right now, going through COVID and everything else, it's just adding another layer of that lack of clarity, okay, to our future. So anxiety takes over. So we're going to spend some time on really determining, how do you develop the clarity? How do you take that clarity and put it into a one-page business plan? As Marty said in the opening, there's no doubt that a business plan is very, very important. But the most important part of a business plan is actually using it. So what we try to do is work with people so that the business plan is clear, concise, and you can actually drive your daily activities from this one-page business plan. And lastly, one of the things I want to talk to you about, and in fact, it's one of my last slides, is how do you reduce the resistance to making change, whether it be your resistance to making change, or maybe it's your team, okay? You have to get them to make changes. Because obviously, from a business coaching perspective, I'm here to make changes in your business or help you make changes in your business, right? Do the same thing over and over again, you're going to get the same results. So we need to think about making changes. So I'm going to give you what I call my secret formula. It's actually not such a secret, but it's so powerful that at the end of this session today, you're going to want to take some notes and use that worksheet. It's called Gleich's Formula for Change, and I'm going to walk you through that. All right, so again, tagline, build a better business, live a better life, but there's a problem with that. All right. The problem is we're all really busy already, right? We wake up in the morning and our days basically are almost already defined for us. We have problems with our clients. We have accounting issues. We have marketing issues, and we get really, really busy. And we are not necessarily able to focus on what's the most important components that we should be focusing on. And you sometimes feel like you're operating in a fog where, again, your day just took over. And again, throwing COVID on top of this, okay, has made it even that much worse. So what I try to do, and one of the things we're going to help you with today, is to rise above that fog and start to look down on your business, okay? So you can strategically maneuver where you need to go as opposed to always driving through the fog, all right? So we're going to try to rise above the fog and focus on your business. Another issue that I have found coaching small business owners is they're not keeping score as they go along. All right. And if you don't keep score, you don't know if you're winning or losing. So when you're creating your strategic plan that we're going to do today, we want to have various metrics, various goals along the way. And we want to be checking ourselves, okay, to know if we're winning or losing. You don't want to get to the end of the quarter, or even worse, at the end of the year, and realize, you know what, I didn't hit my numbers, and you don't know why. And you don't have time at that point to make adjustments. So we want to focus on just a handful of metrics that might be most pertinent to your business, and we want to keep score along the way. And we'll talk to you about how to do that today. Because frankly, if you don't know what the score is, if you don't know if you're making progress, you may never get to the destination that you want to get to. And I know some people will rationalize that and say, well, it's not the destination, it's the journey, okay? You want to focus on the journey. Well, it sounds good, okay? When people tell me that, well, it's the journey. Well, the journey doesn't pay the bills, right? We need to accomplish certain things. So we need to know where the score is and if we're making progress. So again, look at today as an opportunity to focus on your business from a different perspective, to rise above the fog, all right, and start to look down on your business and use some of the tools I'm about to give you to change the trajectory of your business. So the first thing we want to do is talk about strategy. Strategy very often frightens people because they don't know how to create a strategic plan. But I can tell you, without a strategy, all right, you're going to be spinning your wheels and wasting a lot of time. Strategy creates power. It creates a mental state, okay, that you know exactly where you want to go and how you're going to get there, all right? I always use the Constitution of the United States as an example of an unbelievable strategy, right? They didn't know what was going to come 200, 250 years down the road, yet it is a strategy to build a country, okay, that was completely different than what else was out there, all right? And it's always something you can refer back to when you have to make decisions. Is this decision I'm making right now consistent with the strategy or the vision that I have for my company? If it's not, we pass, all right? So a real good strategic plan will actually have you working less, not more. And I like to emphasize that with people. Strategy creates the power to work less, not more. You will be doing more of the most important things, but you will be doing less of the things that are just basically spinning your wheels and wasting your time. All right? So you have to embrace strategy. During your journey, you're going to have headwinds, you're going to have currents, you're going to have waves that are going to push you off your strategy. But like any good sailor, okay, they learn to harness those winds, right? And they learn to take the boat and point it in the same direction that they want to go. So we're going to talk to you about how to recognize a challenge and then also how to harness that challenge and turn it into a positive force. I like to use the analogy of railroad tracks. Railroad tracks are awesome, okay, from a coaching perspective, because you know what? It's a line towards your destination. You're starting at point A, you're going to point B, and you are on tracks, right, to get you there. And what's nice about it, you also have railroad ties that are basically like mileposts, okay, or different points along your journey that you can actually measure. But the best part about using railroad tracks as a visual for your business is that when you lay these tracks down, right, you know exactly where you want to go. You might get knocked off the tracks, you might have a cow cross the tracks, okay, whatever it might be, but you'll get right back on the track and you know where your destination is taking you, all right? So that's where your tracks are taking you to your destination. So the power, okay, of having the strategic plan is what I'm trying to emphasize. All right, so first big idea, all right, is strategy has to come before tactics. I see too often when I'm sitting down with business owners where they're doing this and they're doing this and they're doing this and they're trying all these different things. And then they try to take a strategy and put an umbrella strategy over what they're doing, as opposed to the other way around. You want to start with the strategy. Where am I at? Where do I want to go? Right? What's it look like when I get there? That will determine what the tactics you should be taking to get there, not the other way around. Trial and error, okay, will happen from here from time and time again, but they have to be within the confines of a strategy. So again, I emphasize today, you're going to take this one-page strategic plan and you're really going to drive it. The other thing I always like to point out is that now is better than perfection. All right, I love this quote from George Patton. A good plan violently executed right now is better than a perfect plan next week. George Patton was known for making a plan and then attacking. All right, don't try to get to a perfect plan. All right, analysis, okay, can cause paralysis. You've heard that a million times. We want to build a plan. What is that noise? We still live? Give me a thumbs up if Marty, if we're still alive. We are. I had a loud noise come out of my computer. So George Patton, again, a good plan executed right now is better than a perfect plan next week. So we're going to create a business plan, a one-page business plan that's going to allow you to get to work right away. So 5 key principles to building a one-page strategic plan. We're going to go through them right now, and we're going to start to get into some worksheets very, very shortly. The first thing you have to think about is to clearly define your business. Now, what's that mean? Well, there's a number of questions you want to ask yourself. What business am I in? Now, if you're in the railroad business, okay, speaking of railroad tracks, they used to think of railroad business as being in basically moving freight from one part of the country to the other, right? But what happened was you have the trucks that come in, you have airlines, so your competition and are not just other railroad companies, right? It's anybody who can move that freight from the East Coast to the West Coast. You have to think of your business, okay, as who else can achieve what you're trying to achieve for your client, all right? I look at myself in the growth business, all right? I'm growing people, all right? I believe that if I grow your business, I'm going to grow you as an individual, and you're going to be able to impact the people around you, your family, your community, and so forth. That's the business I'm in. I'm in the growth business, all right? Think about what business you are in. What is the impact you're trying to have on people? The next question is, what business might I be in? And this is one that's coming up more and more these days because of the pivot that everybody's had to do with their businesses because of COVID, right? I have a client who basically is in the party business, okay? They provide all these different types of paraphernalia and different things you can use when you are catering a party, including tents, the huge tents that you put out in the yard for confirmation parties and so forth. I've rented many of them in my life, right? But what happened since COVID, right? Every restaurant, okay, that has a parking lot, all right, has put up a tent so that they're able to now serve breakfast, lunch, dinner, whatever it might be to people. And now my client, who is in this party business that happens to have tents, is also now in the restaurant business. And what are the opportunities now can arrive, okay, at his doorstep because he has all these new relationships, okay, with restaurants that he never had before. So think of your business as to where it is today and what impact COVID might have had on you and what pivot, okay, can or should you be making, okay? Have you created new relationships? Have you gotten new clients? Have you gotten a new knowledge base that will allow you to take your business in a different direction? What business might I be in? Is a great question to ask yourself. Who is my competition? Again, getting back to the railroads, it's not other railroad companies, right? It was the trucking companies, the airlines, whoever can move the freight. Well, who's your competition, all right? If you own a restaurant, okay, and it happens to be an Italian restaurant, are Italian restaurants your only competition? No, right? It's any other restaurant, okay, that's around. And it's also any other business that might compete for your Saturday night people to show up. So maybe it's a bowling alley, maybe it's movie theaters, maybe it's whatever else is going on in town on that Saturday night. So you have to think of your competition as much more than just who might be exactly in your business. Okay, who else is taking your customers away in some other way, shape, or form? Let's talk about your customers. Who are your customers? I find too often that people don't spend the time to create an avatar of their ideal customer, right? And they think everybody could be their customer, when in fact, you really want to clearly identify who your customer is. Who are your best customers? All right. I like to ask people, who are your best customers? Best customers gives you referrals. Okay. Best customer gives you a net promoter score that's really high or a good review online. All right. You really want to identify who they are. What do they look like? How old are they? Do they have children? Where do they vacation? All right. Get that visual of who your customer is so that you are effectively able to market them. You know who they are. You're going to get in front of them. Another question you need to ask yourself is, what is my area of excellence? What do you do great? Right? If anybody read Jim Collins' Good to Great, all right, he talks about you need to be the best in the world, okay, at what you do. Now, I consider myself the best in the world business coach, okay? Am I? Probably not in the whole world, but I'm one of the best in my world, okay? I'm one of the best in New Jersey that I believe, okay, that I can get in front of clients and I can interact with them. Okay, what is your area of excellence? And you want to focus on what you do really, really well. You don't want to spend time doing things that you're awkward at, all right? You want to focus on things you're awesome at, all right? What drives you in the morning? What gets you up? What gives you energy, all right? And you want to do more of that, and you want to do less of the other things. So we need to define what that is first. What is your excellence? What are my critical constraints? What's holding me back? I always ask my clients, why aren't you there already? They describe a goal, right? And I'll say, well, why aren't you there already? That helps them think through what's been holding them back. What's their constraint, right? You need to, before you can fix something, you have to identify it. And they don't spend enough time, typically, doing that. They're basically just focusing on doing things, and they're not working smartly enough. Think about what's holding you back. Why aren't you there already? What do you need to learn? Who do you need to meet? Do you need more financing? What would you do with the money? Ask critical questions of yourself. And the last one I talk about is, where are you on the sigmoid curve? And this might be a new concept to most people that are on the call. So I want to walk you through the sigmoid curve. And it's a concept that is quite simple. Yet I can do a whole webinar, I can do a whole coaching session or two just on this one slide. Every business goes through a life cycle. You're all excited when you start your business. You have resources, you have energy, all right? You're all excited about doing this business. And what happens? You don't have any clients possibly or customers yet. So you start to drain your resources over time. And you could fall to a bottom point. All right. And this is where, and I'm sure Nancy and Marty can probably even give you better statistics than I, as far as the failure rates of businesses, okay, new businesses. It's because they get to the bottom of the curve and they're not sure if they did the right things during this point of time. But you could be 3 feet from gold here, okay? You might have to dig just a little bit more to get yourself to the next level. So you need to identify where you are in this first stage of your business. It's a learning phase, absolute learning phase. But what I like to emphasize is that you have to go through the learning phase to get to the growth phase. You can't get on a growth curve, okay, unless you've learned the things you need to do. So spend the time with your mentors, okay? Spend the time talking to your clients or your customers. Learn what you need to learn, because that's going to accelerate your growth phase. Every business will go into a decline phase, all right? It happens. Every department within a large corporation will go through a decline phase. Every product, okay, within a company at some point will go through a decline phase. So you have to look at it, okay, and recognize when it's coming and turn that into an opportunity phase. Sometimes when I'm working with larger companies, things are going really great right around here on the curve. And I start to talk to them about reinventing themselves. And they're like, what are you talking about? Why would I want to reinvent this right now? Okay, things are going great. I just know historically businesses will go through this curve and they're going to hit a peak at some point and they're going to drop off. So the best time to think about it is not over here, okay? The best time to think about it, the next step in your business is when you're still on your growth phase, all right? You're still on the upswing in your business. You have resources, you have enthusiasm, all good things are happening. When you're over here, you're in panic mode and you don't want to go there and start making decisions. So the opportunity phase in your business, okay, will always come with, or should always come in your growth phase, right? Life cycle of a business. It's not complicated and it's consistent with every business I've ever built and every business I've ever coached. There's aspects of your business that are in the learning phase, there's aspects that are growing, and there's part of it that's dying. And you have to just be aware of it, okay? This is where the clarity factors come into play. We have to be clear before we can create a strategy. So go through your business and decide, where are you personally, where's your staff, where's your business, or aspects of your business along the curve. Do I need to learn more? Okay, am I really kicking butt and I'm growing right now? That's great. Let me leverage that up and let me figure out what's next. Or are we in a decline phase? Is this something, this is a product or service we should fade out? Okay, is it a group of people within my organization that is not necessarily pulling their weight and we need to reinvent them or make changes? All right, so spend the time doing the critical thinking about where you are in your business. Any questions at all if that's popped up yet, Marty or Nancy, that we need to, we're good?
We're good. No questions yet, but I keep looking.
Okay, don't hesitate to just stop me. I get on a roll.
Okay.
All right, so we're gonna ask some more strategic questions. First one is your values. And I don't necessarily mean your personal values, although they are important, all right? I'm talking about your strengths. What do you bring to the table, okay, that really is your differentiator, okay? What do you do better than others? What's your vision for the future, all right? When I ask people this question, I want them to really let their brain go wild, all right? Start with the ideal vision of the future, and we can always work back from that, all right? Shoot for the stars, you land on a cloud, right? Let's really define what the vision of our company should be in perfect terms, all right? As clearly as we can, 1, 3, 5 years down the road. Start with the ideal, write it down. The common thread through all the things I'm going to be talking to you today falls into a pen and a piece of paper, all right? You have to write things down, all right? You have to commit to paper, all right, the things we're talking about today, because what happens is it leaves your brain, all right? You think about it and you know, okay, it will leave your brain, you won't act on it. So write this stuff down. What is your mission, okay? What you want, okay? What do you do, all right? My mission is to impact as many local business owners as possible, okay? That's my mission. That's what I do. I coach business owners. My purpose, okay, is different. My purpose is my why. We're going to talk about Simon Sinek in just a moment. Those of you who don't know Simon, I want to talk about. But he talks about what's your why. Why do you do what you do, right? What is it? Where does the enthusiasm come from? Where does the energy come from? What is the passion that you can bring to the table that is going to transfer to your clients or your customers, and they're going to want to do business with you? All right, we're going to go through a worksheet today that's going to really make it clear what your why is. What are your goals? And I break it down to a year. What do you want to do over the next year? All right, we just started the fourth quarter. Where do you want to be by the fourth quarter of next year? Write it down. All right, how much business do you want to be doing? How many clients do you want to have? Where do you want to be living? What kind of vacation do you want to go on? Get as clear about 1 year from today as possible. Set some goals. We just talked about the sigmoid curve and the learning part of that curve, right? What knowledge and skill do you need to develop during this next year? What's the gap that you have in your business? When we talk about constraints, identify what's the 1 or 2 things that is going to dramatically impact your business, right? If I knew how to do this, fill in the blank. If I was able to speak to fill in the blank, right? What is the gap that you need to determine? What habits do you need to change? What habits do you need to create? all right? It's your character. If you're a procrastinator, okay, if you wait to the last minute to do things, that's part of your character. We might have to fix that, right? Right. What else? What else? Do you avoid conflict? All right. If you avoid conflict, that's a little bit of a problem sometimes as a business owner because you have to make hard decisions, right? It's part of your character. Identify it and say, you know what? I'm going to make this tough decision. I don't care if this person's going to get their nose out of joint a little bit. This is what I have to do for my business. All right. What habits do you currently have that you think you might need to tweak or change a little bit? All right. These are strategic questions that I always want my clients to go through so that I know exactly who I'm working with. All right. And what we need to do to move forward. And lastly, what are your daily actions? Are your daily actions consistent with everything else we talked about here? All right. Are the things you're doing today going to get you to where you want to be a year from now? Is it consistent with your vision for the future? All right. So what does your day look like? All right. 8 strategic questions. And again, I can do 2 hours on just this one slide. All right. Making sure that people understand exactly where they're at, where they want to go, what's holding them back, and so forth. We don't have that luxury today. So I'm leaving you with these questions. So please spend the time and go through it. Third component of creating a very, very powerful strategic plan is playing to your strengths. Right? Very often what I see are people identifying their weaknesses and I have to fix this and I have to fix that. Yeah, okay, that's important, right? But we want to hit the cash register as soon as possible and sometimes creating, okay, more work, okay, creating something that you need to fix. It might take too long. We need to hit the cash register today while we're fixing those other things. So we need to play to our strengths. So, first worksheet that, again, hopefully everybody has. If you don't have the worksheet, that's okay. Just take out a piece of paper and make a T-chart on it with weaknesses on one side and strengths on the other. All right. And I call this the strengths worksheet, but we're also going to talk about your weaknesses in here because we're going to flip them. All right. And identify a weakness that very well may be a strength if it's repositioned, right? We're in the political season of our life right now. And all the spin that's going on, right? All these weaknesses, people spinning as positives, okay? Some way, somehow, everything is great with every candidate, okay? Depending on who you're talking to, or everything is terrible with the other candidate, right? Well, it's all spin, but the spin works in your own brain, okay? If you can take your weaknesses, okay, that you perceive as your weaknesses and spin them to a positive, okay, to a strength, it's going to come across when you're presenting your company. So, one of them that's up here is, we're one of the smallest in our industry. We look at it as a weakness. Well, if you're one of the smallest, you can turn that around and say, because we're small, we're nimble, we're personable, and we're a boutique. And you want to work with us because you're not going to get the big box, type of approach of services. All right. I have had an insurance agent who joined as one of my clients. And he was brand new in the industry, about 9 months. And he was always worried about telling people he only had 9 months experience. All right. And I said, well, think about that for a second. That's a positive. And he's like, how is that? I said, well, what did you do before you joined? And I'll leave out the name of the company, but what did you do before you joined this company? He said, well, I did all my homework. I took a look at all the different companies out there. I looked at their products. I looked at the back office support. I looked at the services. I looked at their track record. Right. So you did all this work, all right, ahead of time to be sure that you aligned yourself with the best insurance company that's out there. All right. Talk about that. Yeah, you're only there 9 months, okay? But you know what? In the time leading up to that, you made the right decision, okay, because of all the research you did. So write down your strengths, no doubt about that. But then if you do have a perceived weakness, spend the time here, okay, and go through this and spin it to a positive because there's always a way of doing that, all right? And the reason why this is important, it removes barriers from your own brain. Okay, as a business coach, and I'm sure Nancy and Marty can attest to this, right? People have head trash. Okay, they hold themselves back because they don't have confidence for certain reasons. All right, well, you need to lose that. All right, and the best way of losing that is facing it right up in front. I'm afraid if somebody asks me this question. All right, well, how are you going to spin it? All right, take the time now, write down the answer so you're not thinking of it on the fly. All right. You want to get good at this. Any question that may come up that you're a little hesitant to answer, you want to write it down, right? And you want to spin it to a positive, because it will no doubt have an impact on your confidence going into that next conversation. All right? Simple little worksheet, extremely powerful. Trust me when I tell you. All right, so any questions with that? We can go on if there's not any. I spoke to you a little bit about why. What's your why? And I also mentioned Simon Sinek. So those of you who are not familiar with Simon, I urge you, okay, to either just Google Simon Sinek, okay? He's became famous for his TED Talk, What's Your Why? And he talks about why people do business with other people. And I'm not, because of time, I can't get into all the specifics of it, but I can do you a favor by giving you the link, okay? And going down here and taking a look, or just Google on Simon Sinek, S-I-N-E-K, What's Your Why? And it'll bring you right here. What he talks about, all right, is that people don't buy what you do. They buy why you do it. People don't buy what you do. They buy why you do it. There's a passion that comes out one way or the other, all right? He talks about computers. That's the example he uses. And he talks about Apple Computer in particular. Apple Computer by far is obviously the most successful, okay, computer company. But they don't sell computers. They sell more efficiency. They sell peace of mind. They sell an easy way of doing things, all right? It's not the hardware. It's not the, becomes a whole mindset there where people buy into why, all right? Anybody can put a computer together. Look at Dell. Dell put together hardware. They're coming back now, but Dell fell into this trap. They thought they were a computer company, all right? And that's the way they sold. And you know what? Boom, they got hammered with it by Apple, all right? Because people buy into the passion, into the concept of why you are an Apple user. Think about your business. What's your why? We're going to go through an exercise right now to create your why. Now, this is an exercise that people struggle with, all right? And I'm going to walk you through it, all right? And I'm going to ask you to do this after we finish up today, all right? This is a worksheet that has 3 columns, and I'd like you to look at it as columns. And in each one of these columns is 3 I believes. And you have to plug in, I believe this, I believe this, I believe this. For example, there's an IT business that we work with, and they came back with, we believe, and I'll just read it right off of here. We believe that IT has the potential to totally revolutionize services. We believe owners shouldn't waste their time trying to understand and manage the tools they use. And we believe highly successful companies should work with partners that are expert in this field, which will free up the owners to do what they do best, allowing to work in the area of excellence. All right? What do you believe? As a business coach, I fill it in like this. I believe that small businesses are the cornerstone of every great local community. I believe that business owners with incremental changes to their business can have a dramatic impact to the bottom line. I believe that because of that impact to the bottom line, they can live better lives, not only themselves, but their family and their community. That's what I believe. So when you're going through this exercise, right, start with the big picture, okay? I believe that, technology can do this. And I believe that if you focus on learning technology, okay, as opposed to outsourcing it, it may take you away from the things you're really good at, all right? I don't care what business you're in, but if you break it down from a very large, I believe, to a tighter, I believe, to really what's the impact to your customer, and you write it down and you rehearse it. The next time you go to a networking event, okay, the next time you're making a presentation, it's going to come across, right? But you have to spend the time to do this exercise. If you think you're going to do it on the fly, forget it. It doesn't work, right? And the reason why I have version 1, version 2, version 3, you might have version 15. Keep refining it, all right? Make it short and concise. What do you believe? What's your belief system? And I do this because I want people to see the passion you have for the business that you're doing and why it impacts them. All right. This is a very, very important exercise, and it's based off of Simon Sinek's What's Your Why? So spend the time to do this. I'm a business coach. I give out homework. Okay. That's what I do, so that the next time I speak to somebody, we've made an incremental change in the business that's moving them to the next level. All right. I'm asking you to do this. Anybody who's on the line right now, this is a wonderful exercise. It basically takes your passion and puts it into words that you're able to effectively articulate. Not only you, but somebody who wants to refer you. They will know your passion for what you do and why you do it. All right. It's a great worksheet. Questions with that? Nothing? If not, I'm moving forward, and I'm always available for questions, not only right at the end of this, but I'm happy to speak to business owners at another time, because I love business owners. I love it. The impact it has on communities is just tremendous. Okay, so we're going to start to build your business plan right now. All right, and you're going to hear me hammer home clarity time and time again. And what I want you to do is take out this worksheet, and if you don't have it, you can see they're very easy to replicate. All right, reality from this to this is your results, and what's in between. What are the roadblocks you have to overcome? And this is where I tell people, and I get a little crude, I tell people, don't believe your own bullshit. All right, make sure you're being honest with yourself. Make sure that when you write down, where am I at today? What's my reality? All right, you are not kidding yourself. All right, what's it really? All right, what are you good at? What are you not so good at? What are your constraints? What's holding you back? What problems do you have? What is your reality? All right, and then where do we want to be in 3 years? All right, write it down. In 3 years, I want to be doing this amount in business. I want to have this many clients. I want to be living in this house. I want to be going on this vacation. I want to be sending my child to this school. I want to buy a boat. Whatever it might be, where do you want to be? And really, I should say 3 years here, because it's important that you look at a 3-year window here. And what's in between? What's in between getting there? What's holding you back? All right. Clarity is key to the next step of putting together our business plan. All right. But be honest with yourself. Where are you at? Where do you want to go? And why aren't you there already? What's holding you back? All right. Again, great worksheet. Get your focus on where you need to be. And it takes you then into the one-page strategic plan. All right. I call it the Stay Focused Plan. And this plan, quite honestly, has changed the lives and businesses of, I can't tell you how many people that we work with at Focal Point. It's a simple one-page idea that leverages not only your day, but the people around you. Because what's nice about this, it can be easily shared with your staff, with your spouse, whoever is important, okay, to be on the same page as you. All right. So we're going to take the 3-year vision from the previous page, right? Everything you wrote here, and we're going to put it here. What's your 3-year vision? All right. Where do you want to be? How many clients? How much money you want to be making? What's the revenue of the company? Where do you live in? What kind of vacation you're going on? What kind of boat you own? Whatever it is, get it on here. All right. Now, what do I have to do over the next 12 months that's going to be consistent with getting me to my 3-year vision? All right. So break it down. If you want to do it in a straight line, that's fine. Okay. If you're going to triple your business, you got to double it. Okay. Whatever it might be, write it down. All right. If you want to send your child to a certain college and you know you're going to need this much money over the next 3 years, what do you have to have put away in 1 year? All right. Break the 3-year vision down into 1-year goals, and then create those metrics. This is the scoring I was talking about in the beginning. Where are we at? In the bottom left-hand corner, okay, are the projects you need to do over the next 90 days that's consistent with getting you to your 12-month goals. All right. What do I have to learn? What do I have to do? Who do I have to meet? There might be just 1, 2, or 3 things on here. That's it. All right. But if you don't define specifically what you need to do to hit that 12-month goal, all right, you're not going to get there. All right. So what do you need to do in the next 90 days? All right. That's going to get you to your 12-month goal. That's going to get you through to your 3-year vision. And lastly, okay, is 7-day activities. Now, this is an interesting one. In fact, I think it was even on one of the other SCORE sessions that I did when I presented this. This is not your to-do list, okay? This is specific actions that are focused on your 90-day activities. Excuse me, your 90-day projects. All right, not your to-do list. This is not returning calls. This is not doing emails. This is specific actions that you need to do that's focused on your 90-day projects, because your 90-day projects are focused on your 12-month goals, and your 12-month goals are going to get you to your vision. All right, there might be 1, 2, or 3 things on here. We all have our to-do list, right? We all have to call this customer. We all have to, I have to do my coaching sessions. I have to do some marketing, all the things I need to do, all right? That's not on this list. This is specific to the gaps I need to fill. This is part of the projects. So what are the things I'm doing this week, all right, that's consistent with my 90-day projects? I have clients that take this sheet, okay, and they fill in this box, and this box, laminate it, and then every week they revisit it and they put a sticky note, right, a Post-it note in this box right here with the 7 things they need to do that week that's going to push them towards this 90-day project. All right, again, not your to-do list. All right, the beauty of this 1-page business plan is, number one, because you have to fill in your 7-day activities every week, it's forcing you to look at your projects to keep score. Are you moving forward? It's forcing you to look at your goals, and it's enforcing your vision, okay, as to where you want your life to be in 3 years, every single week. I can't tell you how many people put together business plans, okay, and it looks great. It's 18 pages, and they put all this time and effort into it and so forth, and it goes on a shelf or it goes in a drawer, and they visit it maybe every 6 months or annually, all right? Doesn't help, especially if you're a small business owner, all right? You need to look at it every single week, all right? So take the time to do this and keep it on your desk, all right? Keep it right there on your desk. It reminds you, okay, specifically what you're supposed to be doing. Does that make sense? This is a powerful tool. I'm telling you right now, this has changed businesses and lives, this one silly little piece of paper, because it keeps you focused. All right. How am I doing on time? 51. All right. I promised you I'm going to give you my secret formula. And this is, it's called Gleish's Formula for Change. And this is also an awesome tool. And you can use this not only in your business, but you can use it in your personal life. You can use it with your children. Okay. It's a tool, okay, that was scientifically developed, okay, to make changes in materials and so forth. It was developed by 2 guys named, one that Richard Blackwood, and the other guy is David Gleischer. And it really is to assess and then make changes on overcoming resistance to change. So it's D times V times F is greater than R. And what's that stand for? The D is dissatisfaction, all right? That you must clearly define something that's wrong. Before you can make change, there has to be some sort of dissatisfaction or pain, okay, associated with making this change, or not making the change, I should phrase it, all right? There has to be something there, okay, that's causing some sort of discomfort or pain. The V is the vision, all right? If I make this change, why will it be better? Okay, what's the purpose of making this change? What's the vision I have for the company or for this person or for myself if I make this change, right? Write it down. What's the vision? Why do I need to make this change? It's going to be better because of this, right? The F stands for first steps. What is that first step I need to take in order to effectuate this change? What's the first thing I need to do? Frankly, coming on this webinar today, okay, could be a first step, okay, for what you're doing, all right? You're dissatisfied, okay, potentially with what you have in place. Your vision for the company is not necessarily fulfilled, okay? So you have to make a change, right? You're taking the first step by getting on the webinar today or other webinars that are coming down the road, right? R is resistance to change. Now, because this is a multiplication equation, if any of these variables is 0, anything times 0 is 0, right? If you don't solve for each one of these variables, if you don't clearly describe the pain or the discomfort or the dissatisfaction, or if you haven't done a good job of creating the vision as to why this change is so important, or if you really didn't even define what's the first step I need to take, and it's only the first step, because the other steps will come once you take the first step, all right? If any of these is 0, you have no chance of overcoming resistance to change, whether it's with a staff member, it's your children, I don't care what it is, all right? This formula applies. So I created a worksheet, shocker, for you and for my clients to go through and clearly define what do you want to change, okay? What's the dissatisfaction, okay? What's the pain? If I make the change, why is this going to be better? And what's the first step I need to take? And just fill in the blanks, all right? Go through the worksheet and fill in the blanks. You can do this with a staff member. I mean, there are times when you tell Susie, okay, in accounting, okay, or Jimmy in processing, okay, to make changes, and they still don't do it. Why is that? Okay, well, one of these 3 things must be missing, all right? Either you didn't clearly define what the vision was, why they should make the change, and why it's better for Jimmy or Susie, whoever, to make the change, or you didn't give them the step, okay, to do that, or they don't feel any pain, okay? They're gonna keep doing it. And that's where, as a boss, from time to time, you have to create the pain, right? I hate to say that, okay? But as a leader, this is where that conflict thing comes in again, right? If they're not willing to make the change and you have effectively laid out the vision in the first step, well, then it becomes, well, if you don't do it, there's the door, right? Those types of things have to be in place. So go through, okay, the changes you want to make and go through the formula, all right? Why do you want to make the change? What's the dissatisfaction? Why is it going to be better when I make the change? And lastly, what step do I need to take to make the change? The greater each one of these values are, right? The bigger the number, the greater your opportunity to overcome any kind of resistance to that change. It's an unbelievable formula, okay? It applies to life, all right? But it really, obviously, from what we all do, okay, it applies to our businesses. And I use this religiously, okay, when I'm trying to effectuate change or trying to figure out why I'm not successful in effectuating change. What did I leave out, all right? What do I need to focus on? So I gave you a lot of stuff today, all right? And each one of these worksheets, okay, could be a full session, trust me. But what I really want to leave you with, okay, is homework, okay? We've covered clarity. It's key. Spend the time to think about where you're at, where you want to go, what's holding you back. Create your vision of your life 3 years from now. Do it. Write down as clear as you can. Determine what your strengths are and how are you going to leverage them. What do you have to do, okay, to leverage really what's important to you? What's your why, all right? Leverage it. Create your one-page plan, all right? Get focused, and if you're having trouble making changes, use Gleish's formula, okay? Walk through the variables and determine what you need to do. I'm done, Nancy. I'm done, Marty. If there's any questions, I would be happy to take them right now.
We do have a couple, and I just want to say this was very inspiring. So thank you, Nick.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
We think about business plans as being all about the number, how much money we're going to make, how much cost is. And what you really brought out today is why you do the business. That's part of it. But if you're not motivated as to your vision and the values you have, why you do it, at some point it's going to become more of a hardship than a love and a purpose. That's
Absolutely.
what I love about this. So thank you.
You're very welcome.
Okay,
Thank you for those comments.
Here's the first question from Job. I'm just going to read it to you and then you can answer it. What in your experience are one or two or a handful of the hardest ingrained traits or behaviors to overcome in transitioning to creating a business or taking a small business to the next level? And in a nutshell, if possible, what are the corrective actions for those inhibiting traits?
Okay, big question, could go in a lot of different directions. What I have found very often is the baggage that people bring to the equation. All right, if you're coming out of a corporate environment and now you started a business, all right, there are things that you have to change about yourself. Okay, when you're in a corporate environment, your day is pretty much dictated for you. You come in the morning and you pretty much know what you have to do. Somebody put the lights on, somebody's paying the rent. All those things were done for you, and you only had one myopic way of doing things. You had one thing you had to do. When you're a business owner, okay, and those of you who haven't read it, I suggest you read it. The E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber, great book. All right, the E-Myth Revisited. What he points out in that book is that every entrepreneur, every business owner has to wear three hats, okay, or has three sets of eyes, whichever metaphor you want to talk about. The first one is the technician, all right? That's the thing you actually do. If you're a chiropractor, you adjust people's backs. If you're an electrician, you put in outlets and lights and all the other things. That's the technical things of what you do, all right? But you also have to put on the manager's hat, okay, or the manager's set of eyes. And the manager is always looking at, you know, what can I make more efficient? What do I have to put in place? What systems do I need? All right, who do I need to hire? All right, you're managing the business. The third set of eyes, or the third hat you have to put on, is the entrepreneurial hat, which a lot of people never get to. And the entrepreneurial hat or set of eyes, okay, is asking the question, where is my industry going? All right, what's happening in my industry and how am I going to position myself? We always talk about the old Gretzky, Wayne Gretzky analogy. When they asked him, why are you so great? Okay, he says, well, most people go to the puck. I go to where the puck is going to be. All right, he thought about his game differently. As an entrepreneur, okay, when you have that hat on, and you should be spending at least 20% of your time as a business owner focusing on where is your industry going, where is your business going, where are your clients going, thinking about the future. So when you're coming out of the corporate world, it's a long way to answer a question, right? It's the baggage that you're bringing in. If you don't have that mindset in the background, okay, you're not going to necessarily think of your business in those three different ways, right? The technician, the manager, and the entrepreneur. But I tell you, spend time doing the critical thinking, okay? Every one of my clients is required to put on their calendar critical thinking time. They actually have to schedule it. I want them to spend at least an hour or two a week in the beginning. I get them to doing more than that. Okay, you got to put it in your calendar. At Tuesday at 2 o'clock, I'm going to do critical thinking about my business. All right, that is something that is, again, simple, but not easy. Okay, because you get caught up in the day. We get back to why, we're busy and the fog and all the other things I talked about before, and you wind up not doing it. All right, so I think I lost the question, but
No, you did great.
go ahead.
He has a follow-up. Do you have time to take one more?
Absolutely.
Okay, it's from Joff again. How might you advise someone who really yearns to be an entrepreneur, but from past analogous experiences has discovered that one's personality tends to be overshadowed by, shall we say, stronger personalities in a given field? Seems to speak to the tried and true concept of having at least one strong partner who can help be the face and voice for the quieter partner, which begs another question. When to determine when you need a partner, and how do you choose that partner?
Oh man, great questions, by the way. So 1000% correct in that when you are building a business, all right, you do have to do that introspection, okay, and determine, what am I good at, right? We talked about that. And what character do I have? What am I not good at? What do I need to complement myself as a business owner? All right. And do I do that by hiring somebody? Do I do that by trying to develop that skill? Okay. Do I do that by outsourcing it? All right. But the bottom line is the first step, okay, is doing exactly what I think it's John is doing. He's coming to the conclusion that, you know what, I don't have all the pieces. All right. And I have to complement what I'm good at and what I'm not good at. So That's the first step, making the determination, clearly defining what it is. Then how do you go and fill that gap? Again, there's different ways of doing that, okay, as I just mentioned. I always like, when I look at partnerships, okay, number one, I don't like anything that has an even number. If you're gonna have a partnership, have 3 people or 5 people, or just stay by yourself. And the reason why I say that is you always want to come up with a decision. If you have 2 people or 4 people, you can get gridlocked, okay? And nothing comes of it. And I'd rather see you make a mistake, okay, based off of a decision than not making a decision at all right? Because part of business is failure, right? We're gonna make little incremental mistakes as we go along. But the worst thing you can do is become paralyzed and not make a decision. So when you are looking for a partner, John, you know, I would say, yeah, bring somebody on who complements your skill. Do a personal assessment, okay? I'm big into DISC, okay? Behavioral assessments, okay? DISC is DISC. You can just Google that too, or you can reach out to me and I can tell you more about it. But it gives you a really good idea as to what your strengths are, your motivators, your behavioral traits, your communication style. And you do want to complement yourself with somebody who has a different style, okay? We were great at that. My last business, we had there was 3 of us, 3 partners. Each one of us, okay, had our own strengths. And depending on who the client was, or the prospective client was, that's the person that would take the lead on that presentation. All right. I tend to be a little bit more roll up the sleeves, not as polished as one of my partners. You know, so I'd be working with the tougher group, okay, which is fine. Okay, that was my area that I'd be able to relate to. So, you know, long story short, it all starts with asking yourself those tough questions.
Very good. We have one last thing. Request is, can you please go over the Gletcher formula again? Maybe put up the slide.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right, I'll leave this one up. So it's a multiplication equation, all right? D times V times Fs is greater than or equal to R, okay? And R is resistance to change. Be sure that when you are looking to make a change in your business, all right, you are filling in each one of those variables. Why do you want to make the change? What's the dissatisfaction? What's the pain you're feeling right now, all right, that you believe you need to change? All right, why do we need to change? What's the pain? Or if you're working with somebody in the office and you need them to change, all right, and they don't feel any pain, okay, you may have to create it, all right? But there has to be dissatisfaction by the person who's creating who you want to change, all right? The vision is answering the question, when I make this change, why will it be better? Why will it be better for the company? Why will it be better for that person? All right, whoever has to make the change, what's the vision, okay, after the change? Why will it be better? Third variable is first steps, okay? What is the step I need to take right now, okay? Maybe it's, if it's a problem with Susie or Jim or whoever it's in your organization, maybe the first step is to call them into your office and say, look, I really do need you to make this change, okay? All right, you're doing things the same way over and over again, and this is not working for us anymore. We need to make the change. What do you think, okay? What's a better way of doing this? And the first step might just be a conversation, but get the ball rolling, right? Again, getting back to Patton, doing something today, violently attack today, is much better than a perfect plan a week from now, all right? Get the ball rolling, have a conversation, all right? But clearly define what's the first thing we should be doing to make the change. If you don't do these 3 things, okay, if any of them is 0, no chance of overcoming resistance to any kind of change. If anybody wants to take that offline, shoot me an email or whatever. I'm happy to talk to you about that.
All right. We do not have any more questions, but we want to make sure everybody has Nick's email here. It's on this last slide. If you'd like to contact him for any of the worksheets, we'll make sure we send them out to everybody who's attended. And if you want to talk to him further about, you know, how to fill them out or any of his coaching advice, please do so. But Marty and I really want to thank you all for attending. It was a terrific workshop. Thank you, Nick, so much for doing this.
My pleasure.
It really is a very different approach and one that I can see would work really well for everyone, not just certain businesses.
Thank you.
With that, Marty, do you want to close?
Thank you. We would really appreciate speaking with any of you who would like a mentoring session. I showed you how to do it, and we look forward to hearing from you. And Nick, thank you very much. Very, very informative. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you all for the opportunity. I appreciate it. And good luck to everybody out there.
Okay. Thanks, everyone.
Take care.